When I was in seminary, I did a summer internship as a hospital chaplain in Louisville. One day I was speaking to one of the resident chaplains, and he belonged to the United Church of Christ, UCC. This is a liberal and progressive Christian denomination. And my eyes kept being drawn to this small white pin on his coat. And the pin had this black curved mark on it. Curious, I asked him what it meant. And he said, "It's a comma. God isn't finished speaking yet." I laughed, but I didn't really get it at first. And then it dawned on me. My friend was gay, and he was going to be an ordained minister. Something clicked in my mind as I made the connection. What he was saying was that UCCs believe that the Bible isn't the final word. God truly is still speaking, still revealing truth. That's the big T. Although most UUs don't use the God word very much, there's also that sense of open-endedness in our denomination. We tend to believe strongly that nothing is set in stone, that there is always more to know. There is not all one powerful truth. Our faith is not dead and stagnant, chained to concrete slabs of dogma and creed. Our faith lives and breathes and changes. Unitarian Universalism is indeed a living tradition. And you've probably noticed that even our gray hymnal is called Singing the Living Tradition. But what does that mean, really, to be a living tradition? I think it means that change is the cornerstone, and that though we honor our roots, we are not controlled or suffocated by them. Ours is a faith that changes as we change. It changes as we question, learn, and grow. And it changes as our needs change, like Marjorie mentioned, the karate instructor and the robber with the samurai sword. Both Unitarianism and Universalism started off as Christian denominations, although decidedly liberal ones, from the start, and we bucked against the teachings of mainstream Protestant Christianity. The Unitarians did not accept the doctrine of the Trinity. That is, they believed that God was one. The Universalists held that everyone would eventually be saved, and that God was a loving God who would never damn someone to the eternal punishments of hell. Reverend Thomas Starr King, a Unitarian Universalist minister in the mid-1800s, went as far to say, "The Universalists think God is too good to damn them forever, and the Unitarians think that they are too good to be damned." I love that one. Our history is replete with ministers, theological thinkers, and ordinary people who questioned and challenged the dogma and teachings of our Christian cousins. This became increasingly apparent when Western culture entered the age of reason, or the Enlightenment, and that was in the 18th century. Our denominational forebears engaged in questioning and interpreting the Bible with an eye toward reason and rationality. And one great questioner was Unitarian minister William Ellery Channing, whose ordination sermon for the Reverend Jared Sparks in 1819 said, "We feel it our bounden duty to exercise our reason upon it, to compare, to infer, and to look beyond the letter to the spirit, to seek in the nature of the subject and the aim of the writer the true meaning, and in general, to make use of what is known for explaining what is difficult and for discovering new truths." And Thomas Jefferson, who some claim had Unitarian leanings, took the New Testament and essentially did an 18th century version of cut and paste. He removed all of Jesus' miracle stories, references to the supernatural, the resurrection, and the divinity of Jesus. He didn't mess around. But he kept what was good and what was helpful to him. It's a great illustration of how UUs to this day deal with tradition and change. We look at the past, glean from it what we can, and we create our own version to suit our needs. We give the old new life. We change. So basically what we're dealing with here is the subject of religious truth, again with a capital T. UUs are quick to say, we don't believe in dogmas or creeds. We absolutely cannot tolerate absolutes. I see religious truth to be an in-the-moment thing. It may have been true in the past, likely true now, but it may develop into something else, some new or better understanding that gives rise to some other capital T truth. This openness to new revealed truths is what I love so much about Unitarian Universalism. And so it is that our denomination lives and breathes and has its being in its ability, its necessity to change while holding on to its roots for stability. In change, we find new life, new growth. In our roots, we find our strength and foundation. But change is the vehicle by which we move forward to new ideas, new visions, and therefore new actions. But change is something we all struggle with, right? I'm a firm proponent of the phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's a certain amount of fear associated with change. But I think it's not so much the fear of the change itself, but rather a fear of the loss, of losing something we hold dear in exchange for something unknown. And as they say, a bird in the hand, right? We sometimes don't want to let go of the known. And therefore we miss opportunities to learn and to grow. I recently heard a story by UU minister Reverend Marcus Hartnett Leifert. He talked about monkey traps in India, where the monkey hunter will take a coconut and hollow out a very small hole in one end and place a ball of rice inside. Then he hangs the coconut up in a tree and waits. Along comes a monkey. The monkey smells the rice, and he sticks his hand into the hole and grabs the rice. And when he tries to pull his hand out, he can't, because the hole isn't big enough for a fist. But the monkey doesn't want to let go of the rice, right? And so he's stuck. He's trapped. We're all like that sometimes. We have something we want in our hands, and since we don't want to give it up and lose it, we become stuck, trapped, stagnant. And sometimes we just need to let go of sacred cows, previously held beliefs, in time-honored practices to make room for more life-giving things. I don't know about you, but I get all goosebumps thinking about how scary that can be sometimes. It's scary to let go of the rice ball, so we hold on to it for all we're worth. So how can we not be like the monkey in the trap and be willing to let go of whatever it is that prevents us from moving forward? Spiritually and denominationally, I think we must look to our past, to our roots, for inspiration, strength, and courage. And we can look back and see what those who came before us gave up in order to evolve and make a greater difference in the world. I mean, can you imagine what courage it might have taken someone living in the mid-18th century to publicly reject the divinity of Jesus? I can't imagine that person's monkey and what he had to let go of. Or we can look at the humanist's complete abandonment of everything metaphysical and supernatural. Perhaps we can gain courage from modern-day activists who choose to leave their places of relative safety and repeatedly put themselves in bodily danger. What did they let go of? But it's not all about letting go of old beliefs or ways of being. Our religious ancestors also embraced new sources of inspiration in the process. And this is where I think UUs differ from other denominations. True, most of us do not like change, especially when it comes to change in our congregational lives. But we seem to be more willing to not remain bogged down by truths that no longer serve us well. For example, we don't look to just one sacred text as our source for religious truth. In our responsible search for truth and meaning, we look to various sources of inspiration that are not limited to just sacred texts. We find revelation in truth in the natural world, in the logic of science, and in the courage and compassion and the sacrifices of exceptional men and women of vision. In fact, there are 6 official sources that UUs claim in regard to revelation of religious truth. Do you know them? Probably not. Take up your gray hymnal and turn to hymn number 1. Now, flip back a page. On the left, you'll see the 7 principles and 6 sources of Unitarian Universalism. The sources are in the bottom half of the page. You might want to reference that as I talk for the next few minutes as a guideline. These 6 sources were written in the 1980s, and they illustrate why we are a living tradition. Although they're not by any means exhaustive and were never meant to be static, they were intended to be reviewed periodically and updated as needed. They are, however, what we now consider to be the most important sources for our quest for religious truth. Our sources reflect how we have changed theologically over the years. For example, our first source, the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which move us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. That can be seen in Transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson's Harvard Divinity School address of 1838, when he declared that the non-creedal structure of Unitarianism permitted us to determine our own relationship to the divine through our own direct experience, rather than have it dictated to us by clergy. The basis for our second source, the words and deeds of prophetic men and women, or women and men, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. That can be found in the work of the stalwarts of the social gospel movement in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, those people who strove to care for the poor masses of humanity that were born of the Industrial Revolution. Our third source, wisdom from the world's religions, which inspires us in our ethical and spiritual life, came about as a result of the beginning of the interfaith movement at the 1893 First Parliament of World Religions in Chicago. The rise of humanism in the 1930s provided the basis for our fifth source, humanist teachings which counsel us to heed the guidance of reason and the results of science, and warn us against idolatries of the mind and spirit. And then we can attribute our sixth source, spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions which celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature, to the increasing interest in protecting the environment and the resurgence of forms of paganism and the earth-based religions. You may notice I didn't mention the fourth source, Jewish and Christian teachings, which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. I think this is still a very sensitive topic for many UUs. There are many religiously wounded people sitting here and in other congregations that bristle at references to God and Jesus. It's unfortunate because I think there's wisdom there too. Christianity, for some, has also become a monkey trap. No doubt there are other sources that are pregnant with the possibility of gleaning truth, and they may one day too find their way onto our list. Ours is a living tradition, constantly changing and evolving as we continue to seek answers. We cannot simply accept absolute creeds. Life is too diverse to stuff inside a narrow box, too complex to be explained by one source. So yes, ours is a living tradition that continues to inspire, and I find it particularly moving that at our UU General Assembly each year, there is an event called the Service of the Living Tradition. It's a service that celebrates change to commemorate those ministers who have died or retired during the past year, our roots, and it honors and celebrates newly minted and credentialed ministers who have been granted preliminary or final fellowship, our wings. These are people that have been called to help shape our future, to be the agents of change, and to give new life to our denomination. I recall going to such a service at GA in Charlotte a few years ago while I was still in seminary. There I was, sitting among about 4,000 of my closest UU friends in a cavernous hotel conference center with all the bright lights and the music. The energy in the room was just palpable. And I remember watching the big screen that they had up in front as it flashed pictures of the new ministers as they were called forward. And I heard the screams and the claps from their families and friends, and I saw the tears of joy and the immense pride that they showed on their faces as they walked on the stage. And I remember telling myself, one day, I will be up there. One day I too will take my place among them. I too dreamed of carrying on the tradition that I have fallen in love with into the future. I was surely going to make change. A lot has happened since then. I graduated from seminary. I got married. I spent last year as a hospital chaplain, and now here I am with you as your intern minister. I keep inching closer to that day when I can walk across the stage and claim my place as a UU minister. My internship with you this year has provided me many wonderful opportunities to learn and grow, and I've gained invaluable experience. In ways great and small, all of you have impacted me in some way. Each of you has contributed to my continuing development, and by extension, you have contributed to the future of Unitarian Universalism, our living tradition. You've helped me change, and I hope I have changed you in some way. I thank you for your warmth, your care, and your support throughout the year for not only myself, but for Suzanne as well. It's something truly touching and something we'll never forget. But now it is time for another change. As I end my internship, I move on to the next stage of my life. I still have some work to do before I'm ready to receive my credentials, and I must go do what I need to do. The road to ministry is long and arduous, However, the road was made easier by being among such a loving, vibrant, and caring community. It will be difficult to say goodbye. And there's part of me, and I think part of Suzanne too, that wants to hold on to you like the monkey holding the ball of rice. And I know that some of you want to hold on to the relationships that we have forged this year as well, but that too is a monkey trap that we cannot fall into. We must let you go, as you must let us go, with love. It was an honor and privilege to serve you, and I will miss you greatly.